University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Sachs? Here. Mrs. Glanville?
Here.
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mrs. Wise?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
Here.
Mr. Cooney?
Here.
Mr. King?
Is there a motion to excuse Mr. King?
Aye.
Mrs. Glanville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Very good. Mr. King is excused. Well, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item is reading and disposal of the journal. Is there a motion? Yeah, usually there'd be a motion to approve or table minutes. Yeah, that's okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so there's a motion to adopt the minutes of, I think it was May 16th?
Yeah.
2022. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss, second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? If there's none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sachs?
Aye.
Mrs. Glanville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise? Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is additions and removals from the agenda and referrals to committee. Are there any additions, removals, or referrals?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to put into committee agenda item E. I think it should probably go to the Building and Housing Committee.
Okay, there is a motion to move agenda item E to the Building and Housing Committee. You don't want to have it on first reading and then refer it?
I'm fine with that. You can do it on first reading of that.
We can do that first reading.
That's fine.
Yeah. I'll do that, and then we'll add its first reading. Okay, then we'll wait on that. Are there any other motions? If there are none, then we will go to comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. If there's anybody here who'd care to address the city, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to speak. Seeing no one here this evening to give public comment, then we will proceed to reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action thereon. Start with a Memorial Day parade recap. For the first time since 2019, our Memorial Day parade returned to Memorial Day. I'd like to take a moment to recognize a few people who made the parade ceremony possible. Thank you to Father Lucas Lanaskis, Rabbi Alexander Harlock, Rabbi Joseph Kirsch, the University Heights Symphonic Band under the direction of musical and artistic director Devlin Pope, and that day under the direction at the event by Scott Soder. University Heights City Service Director Jeff Picorni, Assistant Service Director John Pacella, and the city service employees, the University Heights Fire Department, as well as the South Euclid Fire Department, the University Heights Police Department and Auxiliary, Michigan Falls, VFW and American Legion, John Carroll University, Music Performance Trust Fund, Special Projects Coordinator Ben Schaefer, who, working together with our Memorial Day Parade Committee, brought all of this together. The Memorial Day Planning Committee members, including Communications and Civic Engagement Director Mike Cook, Councilman Chris Cooney, Rich Freed, Robin Bernsheimer, Wendy Bernsheimer, Jerry Jacobson, Annie Robinson, Ben Schaefer, and Sean Weiss. Our University Heights City Council, both those in attendance and those who were not, as all council members were supportive in the ongoing planning of the event. And finally, our parade grand marshal and featured speaker, Major Jake Allen, United States Army Reserves, and JCUROTC. I did not include on here, but thank you also to Kelly Thomas, who I know was also at the event. So thank you, Mrs. Thomas. June is Pride Month, and I am proud to report we are once again flying the Pride flag outside City Hall as our statement of support for our LGBTQ+ residents, friends, and neighbors. In addition, I issued a proclamation recognizing June as Pride Month once again in the city of University Heights. Thank you to Mrs. Gray. I also issued a proclamation last week celebrating the retirement of Garrity Administrative Assistant Delphia Gray, who has been with the school since 1987 and represented the last staff member who worked with Dr. Lori Garrity, for whom Belvoir Elementary was renamed. Mrs. Gray was a beloved part of the school community, revered by faculty, staff, parents, and students. She was well regarded, will be missed, and after her 35 years of service, we wish her well in her retirement. Other events in the greater community I was delighted to take part in include the dinner celebrating the 10th anniversary of Bike Cleveland, whose advocacy over the last 10 years has led to creating a more multimodal transportation network across greater Cleveland, including bikeways, walkways, and public transit. Thank you to Councilmember Brian King for his service on the board of Bike Cleveland. I also attended the 2022 Cleveland Pride March and Rally. Having attended a number of these, this was definitely the biggest and best one yet here in Cleveland. A welcome return of the event covering both malls B and C downtown. Thank you to Councilmember Justin Gould for his service on the board of the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland. Turning to the next events here in our community, the Summer Concert Series and Juneteenth. Summer Concert Series returns next Thursday, June 16th, and our inaugural Juneteenth celebration happens on Sunday, June 19th. The Michael Weber Show kicks off our Summer Concert Series on June 16th at 7 p.m. at Walter Stinson Community Park. In 2018, Weber won MTV's Amazingness Talent and Variety Show. He has also performed with numerous Grammy winners and Rock Hall inductees. He'll play mostly originals, but lately he has been performing at local Michael Stanley tributes, so we don't roll out hearing a little MSB at the Walt. Juneteenth is finally a national holiday, and it's now also an official city holiday in University Heights. Our inaugural, Mr. Cook, our first, and our inaugural Juneteenth celebration will be held at the Walt starting at 1:30 p.m. on June 19th. Jazz band Forecast will headline, and we'll have entertainment from DJ Marcus Allen Ward, a performance from poet Raja Bell Freeman, and a fashion show from New York City's Fashion for All Foundation, and more, including a performance by Nova's Performing Arts Center and an oral history by Cleveland Municipal Court Judge Charles F. Patton Jr. on the Battle of Brownsville, Texas, involving a Black Union regiment and the Confederate Army. There will also be vendors and food trucks. This event will be hosted by Kiara Cotton from WKNYC. Ongoing thanks to Mr. Engelbrecht and his committee for the upcoming event. Really looking forward to seeing this event come to fruition and the turnout that we're all anticipating to celebrate our first real Juneteenth celebration here in the city of University Heights. So thank you. This concludes my report. Next up is reports and communications from the City Council and the taking of action thereon. Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Joint Facilities and Infrastructure Committee had an excellent meeting regarding our safety facilities, and at the end of June, we'll be scheduling a summary and next step meeting. And finally, our Building and Housing Committee also had quite an extensive meeting, updating many pieces of legislation, some which will be brought to the table today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Are there any other reports and communications from City Council members? Okay, very good. Then we will now move on to item 8, reading and disposition of ordinances, resolutions, motions, and consideration of agenda items. And the first item is item A motion to accept the bid from Roniak Paving Inc. as the lowest and best bidder for the 2022 street improvement program, and enter into a contract with the same in an amount not to exceed $753,920.75. Mr. Cheney, you may have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We opened bids on April 28th for this project. It includes 3 streets, Bushnell from Edgerton to Warrensville Center Road, Glendon from Meadowbrook to Washington, White Road, and then we're going to crack, seal, and patch Green Road with this program. We received 3 bids for this project. They were all over the budgeted amount. In 40 years of my career, I've not seen the prices rise as much as they have risen recently. I did ask a couple of contractors today, or even yesterday. I thought the meeting was yesterday, but anyway, if we rebid it, would the prices come down? And they said absolutely not. It actually would go up, because it has gone up since April 28th when we opened the bids. So these roads were on the list 2 years ago and didn't make it. We had to cut them. I think they definitely need to be paved and resurfaced, and I'm recommending that the budget be increased and we go ahead with this project with Roniak Paving Incorporated. Roniak has done several jobs for the city of University Heights. They did a satisfactory job on all of them. Very reputable company, and that's my recommendation.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question for the finance director. What was our budgeted number? It was closer to 5, right?
Yeah.
501,000 was what was approved in the budget.
So we would have to allocate funds from the general fund to the,
We would have to transfer
we would have to
money
transfer.
from the
Okay.
general fund.
And that would be at the next meeting? We would be doing that?
I could prepare something for the next meeting, yes.
And because, I mean, that's quite a significant overage. So I
Agreed.
think it probably will have to be kicked. I want to approve this, but I think it would have to be kicked back into finance to look at our budget and see the budget to actual, like we've been going through, and maybe, seeing what we can do in the budget.
Okay.
We do have a finance committee meeting coming up, yes.
Yeah, there's a finance committee actually on June 13th, so we can add that to the budget. We can add that to the agenda.
Add it to the agenda.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr.
I have
Rupp.
a question for
Sure.
city engineer. On your bid tabulation form here, you have a column here for engineer. Is that the engineering fees or?
That was my estimate.
That was what?
That was my
Oh, that was the estimate.
That was my
Okay, those
estimate,
aren't,
yeah, right.
I about had a heart attack when I saw 600,000 for, that's not engineering fees then. Okay,
And
thank you.
again, I was a little bidder, unfortunately, yes.
Want to do it? We'll meet you out there. Yes. Okay. All right. So it would seem if we wanted to pass this evening, we would need to add to any motion that we would be, approving at least at this time, or committing at least at this time, that we would be having to revisit the appropriation, which is what we would be doing at the Finance Committee meeting and or at the next council meeting when Mr. Kennedy prepares something that would increase the budget line on this from 501 up to this amount.
And Mayor,
Yes.
if I may request at that meeting, on the city engineer's letter here mentions return herewith of the actual bid documents received and tabulation. If you could provide, I guess the bidding documents, they're not part of our packet. I
gave them to
think
the
they were
clerk.
on a prior packet.
Kelly has it.
Okay.
Clerk has it. I gave it to him.
Maybe send a PDF before that meeting so I can look in advance of the finance meeting.
The summary? The summary?
The bid documents.
The whole bid documents?
Yeah, just a PDF
Okay.
of the bid documents ahead of time. So
There's three of them.
the PDF, yeah. What the bid documents in which you sent to the contractors or put online, that's what I'd like to see.
Okay.
Whatever was
Okay.
to their viewing, I'd like to see what they looked at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're not looking for each of the three bidders' bids?
No,
You're looking
just
for
the bid documents,
okay.
the bid set,
Okay,
yeah.
all right,
The permit set or whatever
Right.
you call it.
okay.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry, Mr. Gould, go ahead.
are there cities that do this? Like, are there cities that have the capacity to do this type of work in-house?
I don't understand the question. I mean, do they pave streets in-house?
Yes.
I don't know of any city that does that.
No.
Years ago, that used to happen. Even the county used to pave with their own forces, and they don't do it anymore. Everybody contracts it out.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Well, are we moving to approve?
And
Or are we moving
No.
for something else to
No.
table till the next meeting so this can go to finance, or what did we have in mind?
Can the bid stay open till then? Is that?
Oh, yeah, how are
How
we
long
on
is
the, how?
We have 60 days to award the contract.
Okay,
So we're
so we're
fine.
within time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
fine.
Okay.
all right,
Just make a motion to table.
We have to the end of June.
right. Okay, all right, good. So we have a motion to table to the next meeting with the referral to the Finance Committee of this item.
Second.
There's a second. Okay, so the motion's by Mrs. Weiss, I think, and the second by Mr. Gould. Any further discussion? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, very good. Motion's tabled. We'll go to Finance Committee and we'll bring it back at the next meeting. All right, next is item B, appointment of councils, citizen representatives, and city council members to Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District Materials Management Collection Evaluation Team. This was an item that was tabled at the last meeting, and we are back. So, is there a motion?
So make a motion to enter executive session to discuss it.
Okay, there's a motion to enter executive session to discuss the appointments by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, we are in executive session. We will go to the side room here and everybody else can stay behind. Thank you. Is there a motion to return to regular session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, we are back on the record. We are still on item B, appointment of council's citizen representatives and city council members to Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District Materials Management Collection Evaluation Team. Is there a motion?
So we moving for each individual person, one at
I
a
think
time?
that's the best way to go.
I would like to, oh,
You can do a slate.
You-
You can do a slate, if you will.
But if there is anybody who would want to vote differently,
I'm
then
gonna
doing them
mess up.
separately may also be, advisable.
sorry?
Doing them separately may be advisable if there's anybody who feels strongly about one or more different people on the slate.
Okay.
So, but I think what Mr. Cicero is indicating, though, is that a slate is otherwise accessible.
Correct.
Or acceptable.
I'm just going to move to recommend that we appoint Neil Gould as one of the citizen representatives to the evaluation team for the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District evaluation team.
So is that a motion to appoint Neil Gould as one of the citizen representatives?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we have a motion to appoint Neil Gould as one of the citizen representatives by Mrs. Sacks. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gould. Any discussion on this motion? If there's no discussion, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Is there another motion?
I would like to appoint Eileen Schwartz.
Okay. There's a motion to appoint Eileen Schwartz as one of the citizen representatives to the committee by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, motion carries.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Gould.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Councilman Rock to the evaluation team.
Okay, there's a motion by Council Member Gould to appoint Council Member Rock as one of the members of the evaluation team. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Sacks. Any discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Is there another motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion
Mr.
to
Rock.
nominate Councilwoman Sacks to the committee.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Rock to appoint Council Member Sacks to the committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gould. Any discussion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. We've now exhausted the 4 appointments, so I believe we've exhausted item B. Next is item C, amended ordinance 2022-25, establishing a charter review commission, setting qualifications for members of such commission, and setting forth the authority and duties of such commission, and declaring an emergency. This is on second reading and emergency. Originally, I was going to have Mr. McConville present on some of the changes. Mrs. Weiss or Mr. Cicero, who would like to speak on this?
I mean, Mr. Cicero, did Mr. McConville update you on?
I mean, I'm aware that it is time for the Charter Review Committee. You have 7 members. Each council member will appoint 1 individual, and then the mayor gets to appoint 4. Deadlines are established in the ordinance for submission to the clerk of council. And to me, in essence, that this ordinance simply sets forth the process, which needs to be followed through as is required by the charter.
Yeah, some things I would add is that, as discussed at the committee, we had discussed at one time, and it was something that, I did advance publicly the idea that we would elect some or all of the Charter Commission members. Some discussion was had with regard to some of the impracticalities of that, given the calendar that we were looking to achieve this in. And when it comes to the adjustment where the mayor will be making 4 appointments, I'm willing to consider any citizen for those 4 appointments who expresses an interest in the charter review. There are pros and cons to electing charter review members. The prevailing view in the committee was some cons with respect to, 1, the timing, and 2, the energy and effort that would be required could be detrimental to certain candidates, or when it comes to their consideration. And certainly I wouldn't want, the idea was to create fairness and have a democratic process, but at the same time, I would not want somebody who ought to serve not be able to easily serve, because energy that could be devoted to revising the charter is spent instead campaigning and seeking that office. So, with a June 30th appointment date, I would certainly encourage people, citizens of this community who are not currently office holders or employees of the city, to approach their council members or to approach me and seek appointment. And if you don't know me and if you don't know the council members, do not let that be an impediment. If you have been a longtime citizen or not, but have interest or specialized training or education or familiarity with other charters, or just in a fair democratic process, then all kinds of different perspectives can be considered and brought to the table. So I think, while some council members may have somebody in mind, they may still be open with regard to who they're seeking to appoint, and those are things that can be sorted out over the next few days or next couple of weeks before we make final appointments on or before June 30th. So some of the other additions to the process are there will be, I think we already had the provision where there would be regular meetings twice a month, but we have added in a process where not only is there the interim report, but there is also an advance report that the council and the mayor and the public can comment on, and the Charter Review Commission can go back and make any further adjustment if appropriate based upon comment that they've received. And I think that makes it more of a back and forth process, and it may be revealing with respect to implications with regard to certain changes. I do think that this stands to be a scholarly process more than a political one, one that yields good government results. Certainly that's what we're all aiming for. And but sometimes there are unintended consequences that call for a review period and a comment period. And I think by building one in, we avoid, we at least have a mechanism that hopefully would avoid something that wasn't thoroughly thought through from advancing from the commission to the council to place on the ballot. So I think that we've taken some steps here that will help to make this a better review commission than the last attempt. No disrespect intended to anybody who served on the previous charter review, but there were some things that happened in that review process that made it less than successful that we should not repeat. And I think we've taken some steps here to help ensure that it does not give it a better chance at being a successful process, which is something that we all want to see. So that, I think, is the most of it, at least certainly from my point of view with regard to some of the adjustments that we made to make this a better process. Mrs. Weiss, I know that you sponsored this and you chaired the committee where we had the discussion. I'm sure you have some things you'd like to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing I wanted to add is that besides, the mayor requested if any residents, would like to do that, he can appoint 4, but all of the council's appointments also, if they could please email something to Mrs. Thomas that, and copying the council member that is appointing them, that they would like to serve, so. Before June 30th.
Yes, very good. The sooner the better, because that gives everybody more time to consider many qualified applicants that we hope to be able to choose from. Mr. Gould.
And Mayor, I'm just, excuse me, I have to look at I keep all the notes and the packet on my phone, so I'll just, looking at section 8, I just think that really underscores the public portion of what you discussed, that there's this report that comes out as a progress report to the public, that every meeting that is had has a section for public comment, that the public gets to comment on this pre-release, the 7-day report within 7 days before they publish their final report, we get notice and the public gets to comment, and all of us really get to comment. And then through that deliberative process, that final report gets to come out. So I just think there's a lot of opportunity for input there, and I just agree with you. I think it's a much more scholarly project and has the opportunity to really make some great impact with agreement of all of us.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Are there any further comments?
I have a
Mrs.
question.
Sachs.
Thank you, Mayor Brennan. So the deadline is June 30th, but we're on recess until September. So does this wait until we come back, or? Okay.
No. I think.
We'll call a special meeting, or?
No, I think simply everybody's able to make their own appointment. It doesn't require further ratification at a council.
And then they
meeting.
just vote.
So you will make your appointment and deliver it to Kelly no later than 7 p.m. on the 30th, as will everybody else here. If anybody fails to do that, then there is a provision for council to make appointments. We could always call a special meeting then for that purpose, but only if we have a vacancy or a non-appointment or an appointment followed by a vacancy would we need to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
I'd like to make a motion to pass 2022-25, an ordinance establishing a charter review commission, setting qualifications for members of such commission, and setting forth the authority and duties of such commission, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, we have a motion on emergency by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any further discussion? Okay, since this is on second reading, it does not require a separate vote on the suspension of the rules. We only need to take one vote, but it's on emergency, so it does require 5 votes to pass. So, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Sachs?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rott?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye. Okay, very good. Motion carries. And citizens, please let us know if you'd like to serve, because we are now on the clock to make our appointments. Next is item D, Resolution 2022-30, adopting the alternative 2023 tax budget. Mr. Kennedy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a statutory requirement set by state law. Basically, what we do is project revenues and expenses for 2023, submit that to the County Budget Commission. It's basically a process whereby the Budget Commission approves of the amount of money that we're requesting to assess in property taxes according to the millage that is on Schedule 1 of the form that's being submitted to the county. A couple of things of note. There is no increase to the amount of millage being assessed next year. We are changing a little bit of the distribution on the inside millage. This year will mark the last payment for the 2013 general obligation bonds. So once those expire, we can then use that millage for other purposes. So what I've done in this proposal is to add a $0.25 mil to both the police and fire pension collections. That'll take a little pressure off the general fund. By charter, we're required to assess property tax to pay for safety forces pensions. The amount that we collect annually is not enough to pay the entire bill, so the residual amounts are paid out of the general fund. By increasing the 2 pension funds by that nominal amount that was previously going to debt service, it'll lessen the amount that we're required to pick up in the general fund next year. So as I said in the briefing memo, I sent this on to the County Budget Commission to make sure that they took a look at it before it was approved. They're okay with everything as submitted. So this is on first reading. It would have to be approved prior to July 15th and filed with the county prior to July 20th. So we can have the second reading and approval at the next council meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Are there any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
There's a, excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Kennedy, go ahead.
There's a reference to Resolution 2022-32 in the memo from Mr. Kennedy, but the actual resolution is 2022-30.
The draft resolution that I had.
Yeah, from June 2nd, it's the second line down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Is that insignificant?
Well, I think the memo inadvertently refers to 32 instead of 30, and then, you know,
Yeah.
30 is the resolution that's before us. 32 is a different item later on the agenda.
Yeah, it's just minor. I just want to make sure it all ties together.
Yeah. No. So no.
I probably wrote the memo when I had the first draft of the resolution list, but it got changed.
Yeah. The number may have been changed.
My
simply
apologies.
During the process. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we can consider this, you know, the first reading had, and we'll have this back at the next meeting. All right, very good. Then we will move on, and thank you, Mr. Kennedy, to item E, Ordinance 2022-31, amending codified ordinance section 1060.02 entitled Notice to Owner or Occupant to Repair, to establish the obligation of the city to maintain stormwater features installed by the city in the right-of-way. This is on first reading. Mr. Rock, you were the sponsor.
Yes, Mayor. So, well, this was actually, when I got the packet the first time I saw my name as the sponsor, so I'll be happy to take credit for it. Basically, the last meeting we had, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, there was an item that came before council where we would be reworking the intersection of Washington and Silsby, and as part of that reworking, we were going to do bump outs at the intersection in which the right-of-way portion would come, I guess the curb at the right-of-way would come into the street, and part of that design included a bioswale in 3 of the corners of that intersection. And my argument was that a bioswale, which is a depressed area of land, and in this case was between 3 to 4 feet of hill, I felt that it would be unfair for the resident of that household to maintain that bioswale, and that should be a obligation of the city to maintain. So it looks like from the packet here that this ordinance sort of cleans that up and puts the maintenance responsibility on the city, since it's the city's stormwater feature that they're installing, and throughout the future we'll have to maintain. So this is on first reading. I wanted it to go to committee so everyone could have an opportunity to weigh in on it, but since it's on first reading, I guess we can weigh on it here.
Okay, very good. Yes, Mr. Cicero. And thank you, Mr. Rock.
This ordinance actually would overlap and sort of, if you will, jumps ahead of proposed ordinance 2022-34, which is on the agenda tonight, because we're proposing for your consideration amendments to the entire chapter 1060, so this would follow. The other thing on substantive that I wanted to mention, just because it says in subsection B that the city shall maintain, grade, repair, or replace, it doesn't say at the city's cost and expense.
Oh.
So I think you need to clean that up in committee and make sure that it's very clear that if it's your intention that the city has the financial obligation, this would give us wiggle room the way it's written, that we could assess. And I don't think that's your intention.
Okay.
So we just need to clean that up.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I agree, Mr. Cicero. I think the intention here was that the city is doing it at its expense, and that it would not be, for instance, assessing that cost to the adjacent property owner.
Right.
Right.
Or fining that property owner for not maintaining it, or because the responsibility is on the city.
Correct.
So I just wanted to make it clear, 30 years from now, when someone buys that home, they understand that that's the city's responsibility. So do you think we need to take this to a committee, or is that something we can just include here?
I would take it to committee.
Okay.
I would take it to committee. And then you can bring it back probably by the 21st, meeting of the 21st, and then consider it then.
And this is first reading, so we're not tabling it, we would just refer to committee.
Right.
Okay. Well, do we need to make a motion for that then? To refer it, or?
A motion to refer to committee doesn't hurt.
Okay.
I think it's
With the idea that we bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay.
And if for some reason the committee doesn't meet, I mean, the bioswale is not going to be built the next, week or two. I mean, when it is built,
Right.
the responsibility for who maintains it can still be established.
Right.
Whether it's this month or in September.
Yeah.
okay. Great.
So I'll make a motion then to refer this to committee. I think the vice mayor had suggested the building committee. Is that okay with you? Is that something we can?
Sure, I'll make sure it's on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll make the motion to refer this to the building committee.
Very good. We have a motion by Mr. Rock to refer this matter to the building committee, this ordinance 2022-31, which the committee chair for building and housing, agrees, which is always good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. No, Barbara, you're.
Yeah, we'll take the second from Mrs. Blankfeld, given the committee referral. Because, arguably this could go to service and utilities, but because the building and housing committee is already working on revising these chapters, it probably does make more sense for that reason to send it to that committee. So, very good. We have the second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Item is referred to the Building and Housing Committee. And the first reading has been had. Next is item F, Ordinance 2022-32, enacting codified ordinance Chapter 812 entitled Peddlers and Solicitors and declaring an emergency. This is on emergency, and Mr. Gould, you are the sponsor of this legislation. Would you like the floor?
Thank you, Mayor. So this ordinance has been in the works for some time now and would create a registration process and permitting process for peddlers and solicitors in the city of University Heights. I am grateful to the mayor and to the police chief for the great work that they did on this, specifically with making sure that we had the administrative support to keep our citizens safe. By this ordinance in the city of University Heights, if individuals are going to be going door to door, doing sales or otherwise peddling or soliciting as defined by the ordinance, they will have a background check. They will have been fingerprinted. They will have been photographed. They will have a permit issued to them that must be displayed on their person with the photo visible outside. And they will have a list of individuals in this city who have decided that they will not welcome solicitors and peddlers. In collaboration with NOPEC, we are establishing by this ordinance a do not knock registry, which will be maintained and advertised by NOPEC and the city together in partnership, and that any member of the community can register. When a community member registers for this program, their name will be placed on a list for a year that will be distributed to every permitted solicitor and peddler, stating that their house should not be visited. They will also be provided with documentation regarding the program and further instruction regarding the program, and even a little static cling display to place on their front door or visible to those from the street. And so by this, we will allow the citizens of University Heights to take control of the individuals who have come to their door, who are coming to their doors to make sales. I know that members of council have heard, as I have, members of the community who have felt taken advantage of by individuals who have come to their door, surprised by changes to their utilities, or even intimidated and made to feel unsafe while they were home with their children without another person home, by somebody coming to their door and insisting to see certain documents or identifications. And this will give them another tool, and frankly, our law enforcement officers another tool to ensure that our citizens are safe, to ensure that our citizens are informed, and I'm really happy with what's happened with this ordinance. So that's the presentation, Mayor. I will say in the ordinance, and excuse me, again, I'll bring this up on my phone, there were a couple changes that were discussed in the committee. The first is to section 812-04, paragraph C. And that is to remove the second instance of county, so that the paragraph will now read that the applicant has had a permit revoked within the previous year for violations of soliciting regulations in the city or any other municipality in Cuyahoga County or any adjacent county. Finally, with the police chief's, Chief Rogers' suggestion, section 812-05. I'm going to suggest 4 amendments to the section. The first is to remove the first instance of the word "or registration." The second is to remove the second instance of the word "or the third instance of the word "or registration." And the reason that is to make sure that we are requiring individuals to show their permit. There is actually a 2-step process. The first is a registration form, which the information will be placed on, and then an actual permit is issued, which has on it the permit number, the solicitor's photograph, their name, height, weight, eye color, hair color, the company they work for, the company's address, and the date of issue and expiration of the permit, as well as the laws and regulations that apply to that permit. And we wanted to make clear by this amendment that we are requiring the permit, not the registration, to be displayed. And then the final, the third amendment that I would make is to the word "the," from changing "property of the resident" to "property of any resident." So as it's stated now, if a law enforcement officer or a municipal officer, a resident, or an employee requests to see the permit of the person, they have to present that. And it says right now, "the resident," which makes it seem like it's limited to one resident. And I didn't want our officers or a city employee to be limited in where they could ask for that permit. So if they see somebody going to door, when they enter the property of any of our residents, a permitted person would have to show that permit. And finally, one of the discussions that came up regarding the permit was that, as it is right now in this sample, and I understand it was just a draft, that the law is very small, and it may not be apparent the name of the individual or the company, 2 pieces of information that citizens will want to see more immediately. And so we want to make sure that this permit is visible, yes, but also that it's visible with the photo side facing forward. So the final amendment I would make to that section is right after the first instance of the word "permit," so each peddler or solicitor shall carry in plain view the permit with the peddler or solicitor's photo facing forward at all times when in the city for the purposes set forth in the permit or registration. So with those, are there any questions? I'll turn it over for questions, Mayor, if there are.
Okay, I think we got all those facing forward, okay.
And I've redlined it, and we'll send it out to the clerk and to the law director.
Right, I think we will need to have a motion, though, to formally
Yes.
amend. And, right. And by forward, we mean outward.
Outward,
Right.
facing outward, there we go.
I think so.
Sure.
I mean, it would be contrary to the intent here for somebody to put the photo behind them
No, flip it.
and have it
Flip
flip
it
forward,
or
say,
in the
well,
pocket
I'm
or-
moving forward and the photo's forward, but you can't see it because I'm moving forward, it's facing
Facing
my
outward
back.
makes sense, yeah.
So outward, I think, so no matter where you're wearing it, where it's visible, it's outward and the photo's outward. I mean, it seems unlikely, but
How about
But then again,
it's
visible to
visible.
onlookers.
This side is visible. Is that
in plain
clearly
view, I
visible?
suppose.
But that's the point, is, I guess, should we use the, oftentimes, you're right, Mayor, I think we like to repeat language that we have used since it's clear and apparent. We've already used, should carry in plain view the permit.
Right.
Perhaps with the peddler or solicitor's photo in plain view. So therefore, direction is not, it's really just that the photo, with the photo side, with the photo side. I'll make that on there. Mike, do you have suggestions on how to?
I'm sorry I didn't think of this in committee, but as I was listening,
sure.
it occurred to me. Yes, Mr. Cicero.
Read again what you proposed to me,
Sure. One moment.
please.
Okay, so it would be an amendment to the first sentence, and the sentence would now read.
812.05.
Yeah, 812.05, first sentence. Each peddler or solicitor shall carry in plain view the permit with the full side of the permit bearing the peddler or solicitor's photo in plain view at all times when in the city for the purposes set forth in the permit or registration. With the full side of the permit bearing the peddler or solicitor's photo in plain view.
A suggestion, each peddler or solicitor shall carry in plain view the permit, which shall at all times be visible to others.
The problem is that we now have a back and front of the permit, only one side of which has the
Then you
information we
simply
want.
say, the permit, comma, the front of which shall be visible to others at all times. I think you want to be specific and say, the mayor's suggestion of outward was good, but you want the front of which shall be visible. So a comma after permit,
What's the front?
Front of the permit.
whatever we say it is.
Well, shall we say the photo side rather than front? The
I
side,
think there's probably only going to be one side from the mock-up I saw.
Well,
there's
no,
two.
it's
now
going to be
there's two
two-sided.
because the
rules.
law's going on the back.
We can add the term front, back.
Yeah, let's put, we could do that, thank you, chief. The chief was just saying.
This is the
it's
front.
Probably on the
Front.
side of the view of the microphone,
I mean, it's still
that the
different than
front of the
driver's
idea
license.
can say
You know what
front, but the
is,
back
you
is
know
the
what the
Right.
back is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, so I put a comma after permit in that first line of 81205, and then add the words, the front of which shall be visible to others or other individuals, comma, at all times when in the city. Might not even need another comma. So. I think that achieves what you're looking for.
Just, I don't mean, well, I do mean. visible is to the person, display is an act of the wearer. So just suggestion, comma, the front of which shall be fully displayed, comma.
Oh.
That's good too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's good too.
Yeah.
Perfect. The front of which, okay, so that amendment is now each peddler or solicitor shall carry in plain view the permit, comma, the front of which shall be fully displayed, comma, at all times when in the city for the purposes set forth in the permit or registration.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Mr. Gould, do you have anything further at this time? Do you want to
No.
just go ahead and make the motion to amend?
Well, I think there was there was at least one question I see.
Okay,
sorry.
well then, Mrs. Sachs.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman Gould. First, I want to say it was a wonderful process to see the administration, police chief, the committee work together to put this together. And as you can see, wordsmith it down to the letter. I'm not sure I heard and forgive me if I just didn't hear it, that although we are going forward with this permit, the city in no way endorses the person who is soliciting or peddling, and that is clearly written on this as well.
That's a great note. That one of the things on this note is just that University Heights does not, by issuing this permit, endorse either the licensee, business, or product. And that was important because we did not want this permit to be viewed as, this is the University Heights vacuum cleaner, or this is the best security system. Look, the police chief's, signature is in the bottom right-hand corner of it. And so we did not have versions of the permit which bore the seal of the city. It does say University Heights on it, but it's very clear that this is just the issuing of the permit. And I think that will be part of the education process that will come with this and will be known that it's just a permit, Any other questions? Then Mayor, I will make a motion to amend attachment or Exhibit A, the actual codification section, Chapter 812, first in Section 812.04, paragraph C, changing the second instance or removing the second instance of the word county so that the paragraph will read that the applicant has had a permit revoked within the previous year or for violations of soliciting regulations in the city or any other municipality in Cuyahoga County or any adjacent county.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Gould, as he stated, to amend.
Can I do it all in one, actually? Both of them, since I don't think there'll be much upset about it. And also to amend.
Okay, please proceed.
Section 812.05, so that it will read, each peddler or solicitor shall carry in plain view the permit, comma, the front of which shall be fully displayed, comma, at all times when in the city for the purposes set forth in the permit or registration. They shall provide to any resident or municipal officer and or employee the permit upon entering the property of any resident. At the conclusion of the period of time for which the permit or registration was issued, the permit and registration shall be returned to the police chief or designee.
Okay, very good. We have a motion to amend as read by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion on the amendment? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sachs?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, very good. The ordinance is so amended.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to pass Ordinance 2022-32, an ordinance enacting codified ordinance Chapter 812 entitled Peddlers and Solicitors and declaring an emergency.
Okay, very good. Motion by Mr. Gould to adopt Ordinance 2022-32 as amended on emergency. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Oh, thank you. Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay. Seeing as no suspension of rules is necessary, we'll take just one vote, that being on the motion itself. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfield?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Point of order.
Yes,
Why is there not a suspension necessary on this one?
because we've read this before.
No, I don't think we have.
Oh, we have?
No, sir, I think we
Oh,
had
my
it at
goodness.
safety last time, and then it came back to safety again. Last time, we had only a presentation by NOPED, but the ordinance was not presented at that time or read.
That's true. Mrs. Thomas, I think that may be correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, yeah, your point of order is well taken, Mr. Gould, so let's start over. There will be 2 votes. The first vote is on the suspension of the rules. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the suspension of the rules?
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfield?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, very good. The rules are suspended, and then on the main motion.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfield?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Very good, motion carries. Next is Ordinance 2022-33, amending codified ordinance chapter 1064 entitled Solid Waste Disposal and declaring an emergency. This is on emergency. The sponsor is Councilperson Blankfeld. Mrs. Blankfeld, would you like the floor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. As part of this committee's consideration of proposed updates and changes to various University Heights codified ordinance chapters related to building and housing issues, 2 of those have been identified and are the subject of these next 2 pieces of legislation. The remainder will be before council at our next meeting on the 21st. If Mr. Cicero would elaborate, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councilmember Blankfeld. When I interviewed with members of council before, back around the beginning of the year, and with the mayor, and in speaking with Mr. McConville, one of the things before making the decision to hire me as your prosecutor was said we need help with building and housing enforcement. And I looked at the building and housing enforcement that existed, and the city is actually in a state of flux, but a state of flux in a positive way. Because many other communities had already separated the building department, or as it is known in University Heights, the Division of Building Engineering and Inspection, as is required by the charter, hint for the Charter Review Committee. The building department is now separate. There's a building department, and now there's a Director of Housing and Community Development. Many other communities in the past 20 years, if not 25, had separated those entities. So you had housing, and then you had building, commercial and residential. So one of the tasks that I undertook, I spearheaded it, Luke fly-specced everything, and then we used or abused a couple of young associates at our firm on our own dime.
That's what they're for.
To go through Title 10, Title 12, Title 14, and other titles of your codified ordinances to make it modernized and consistent. And what I would submit to you in this first submission is that what we have done throughout is to make sure that the city has the flexibility, so either the building commissioner or his or her designee, or the Director of Housing and Community Development or his or her designee, can engage in activities relating to residential housing, residential solid waste, sidewalks, and the like. You gave a general grant in 2018 when you created the position of the Director of Housing and Community Development, but there were other specifics in the specific codified ordinances that didn't give the Director of Housing any authority to do anything. So this gives both departments the flexibility now and going forward to engage in them. The only thing of note in this specific ordinance on solid waste disposal that I would set forth, that we had ample discussion at the committee meeting, and I do want to just anecdotally state, we are changing, or propose for your consideration, changes in where garbage cans must be kept. Evidently, it was a hot button topic. I noted in my life in University Heights, there are 3 types of homes in University Heights that I will categorize as follows. The Center Hall Colonials with the 2-car detached garage behind it. There may be a porch that has a door in the one bedroom that goes out onto the porch, or they leveled it and they put a family room up. Almost always those garbage cans are kept on the side of the two-car detached garage. The second type of home I characterize as the Belvoir, Churchill's, University Parkways, Hadley's, where you have a wide home with a two-car attached garage on one side or the other. In every one of those homes that I know of in my 56 years, the garbage cans are kept on the side of the garage, on the walkway to the backyard. The third type is the one I grew up in, which is known as the Ashurst Meadowbrook Hill homes, where you have a house on a hill, and typically it was a single-car garage underneath the house. And my father screamed at me for 12 years, well, 7 of those 12, where do you keep the cans? And it was in the garage. You had to keep the cans in the garage. So in every one of those instances, when we looked around, and then we discussed it at committee, historically, people don't typically, except for the two-car detached, keep them behind the rear building line. They're just behind the front building line. And they're out of sight, if you will, for the most part. So that's really the only other significant change. We did make it consistent throughout. There was a couple places where building commissioner, the word building wasn't in, and we've given that flexibility here and in an upcoming ordinance as well with the sidewalks, so that either department, if you will, can enforce these provisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Was there any, I was unable to attend the committee meeting where this was discussed. Was there any discussion regarding having, I mean, you've noted 3 different standard types of house builds that we have in the city, and most of them fall in one of those 3 categories. And I think most of us would tend to agree that if you have an attached garage on the front of the house, that asking somebody to move the can behind the house doesn't necessarily comport with what seems like a reasonable practice in general. But if you have the detached garage in the back, like a lot of us have in the western part of the city, the part that was first developed, there tends to be an expectation on those streets that the cans not be kept on the side of the house, but be kept closer in the back at the garage, and that's where we get the most complaints. Yeah, or, administratively, police department, and I think in the housing department as well, that folks find it unsightly to have the can within view towards the front property line when there is an easy way to take it back behind the rear property line. Was there any discussion about having it be rear property line where there are detached garages and front property line where rear property line where you have detached garages and then front property line where you have attached garages?
I don't recall a specific discussion about that, but with Mr. Engelbrecht, one of the things that we discussed and we sort of changed a little bit of the provisions in here, there's no warning period anymore. We took that warning period out, which was quite frankly anachronistic. I mean, I couldn't believe it was in there. I've represented 12 other communities in my career. There's never been a warning period. You're always free to give a warning, but you don't have to. And that was, it started over. Every time, if somebody had gone for 30 days and behaved themselves, but then it happened another 20 days later, you had to start over. Yeah. But the other thing there is this, with this is not a one-time ordinance. If somebody is causing a nuisance, there are other ordinances that we can enforce the law, and it's not just necessarily the garbage can, rear property line, front property line. It could be a nuisance condition, it could be a blighting condition. So there's other mechanisms to utilize other than this, but we did not specifically want to differentiate, I think, between the homes. Right.
Okay. I just wanted some clarification on that and also some building of the record with respect to that, because this is something I expect that we'll get phone calls about. And I want to be able to express the rationale behind the change. I did want to note, and I did bring this to Mr. McConville's attention, while we were updating this section, that the section here, 1064.07 on special collections, does not currently reflect our current practices either. And since we are making updates, I think it would be a good idea to update 1064.07 to reflect the current practices on special collections. There's a section here that says, like, item A1, the person requesting such collection shall make application therefore on forms to be provided by the service director not less than 24 hours before the requested time of collection. We don't do it like that. We don't leave it to the residents to give us a requested time for collection per se, as much as they request a collection, and we endeavor to be out there within 4 business days. This does not reflect current practice. What also doesn't reflect current practice is only that the request would be filed only during normal business hours from 8 to 4:30 at the Division of Building Engineering and Inspection, when we also make this available online 24/7. And that was an important change, and we actually seek to encourage people to make their special collections online by credit card that way versus going to the building department. And while they still may go to the building department, we are encouraging not doing that. So I think that the 1064.07 section should be updated to reflect our current state of practice with regard to how we do this, just like the other updates reflect our current state of practices with the creation of the Department of Housing and Community Development and a more modern take on the location of trash cans. I would then suggest that in the absence of having, clean language for what we do here for 1064.07, that we would treat this as first reading and then amend this and bring it back to the next meeting.
Mr. McConville and I had discussed that, and I'm in agreement.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that's going to require committee consideration, or if that's something that can simply be...
There are other items we're going to discuss that make sense, we can add that to the agenda.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay. Well, then, my suggestion would be, unless there's further discussion we want to have on this, that we go ahead and move to send this back to committee for an update on 1064.07, and hopefully have it back at the next meeting.
Actually, our meeting immediately precedes our next meeting.
Okay, very good. Well, then, I think we can assume that we will have it on the next agenda in that instance, and then, with the idea being that we are having that building and housing meeting in the hour preceding the next regular meeting. Okay. So is there a motion to table accordingly? Or refer? Thank you, Mr. Cooney. So motion to refer to committee and then bring back at the next regular meeting by Mrs. Blankfeld, second by Mr. Cooney. Any further discussion? Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Ratt?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Matters referred back then to committee for that one item, and then we'll see it back at the next meeting. Thank you, and good work, everyone, with regard to the updates in general. This was something that we've needed to do, and this is a good step. Good work. Okay, very good. Next is item H, Ordinance 2022-34, amending codified ordinance chapter 1060 entitled Sidewalks, Driveways, and Tree Lawns, and declaring an emergency. Sponsor again is Mrs. Blankfeld. Would you like the floor?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
And as I previously stated, this is among those that we've been looking at. There will be additional ones at the next meeting, but Mr. Cicero said that he would speak to this as well.
Okay, Mr. Cicero.
Thank you. Again, in this instance, we added, where necessary, the Director of Housing to have authority to enforce this chapter. It's, to me, sidewalks in the committee felt are part of the residential process, so to inspect them. We did add a few things in, which is interesting. I know it's probably not many, but I'm sure Mr. Chuni would agree with you that there's probably still some stone sidewalks somewhere in the city. So we added in the word stone to make sure that people had to replace the stone sidewalks as well as the concrete. And then the only other really substantive change was that there is a, if you will, 15-day appeal period. We try to make it consistent with those, at the same time frame in the housing bond violations. It was sort of out there, they were inconsistent, so we try to make it consistent. Other than that, with that, I'll take any questions, but I have no further comments on this. But I do recommend passage so that the other one that Mr. Rock's name was on could go to committee before the next council meeting, and we can then incorporate those changes in the next meeting.
Oh, yes, yes, I see what you mean. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Any further discussion on this? And if not, is there a motion to adopt on emergency ordinance 2022-34?
Also move, Mayor.
Okay, motion on emergency by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Cooney. Any discussion on the motion? Then we'll take two votes. The first is on the suspension of the rules. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, very good. The rules are suspended. And then on the main motion.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. The ordinance is approved. Next is item I, a motion to approve purchase of replacement sewer utility van through the State of Ohio Cooperative Purchase Program from Valley Ford Truck, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $38,694. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is an item that was discussed in the past at the Finance Committee back in November. Service Department sewer van, we call S1, is a 2009 Ford 350, and it's in poor condition. It's reached the end of its service life. It's on our schedule for replacement as we follow our replacement schedule. We went out to find out if there was a state purchase program available. We found the Ohio Cooperative Purchase Program, contract RS 1007536, and item 8AT is available and awarded to Valley Ford Truck of Cleveland, Ohio, in the amount of $38,694. So they provided us with their quote for that vehicle, which I attached to the memo, and I'm recommending that we purchase the van through them under the State Cooperative Purchase Program.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni.
I'll second it.
Oh, are you making the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, motion to approve by Mr. Cooney. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, I'll take the second from Mrs. Sacks. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankville?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Good, motion carries. Next is item J, motion to approve purchase of one-ton dump truck replacement through the State of Ohio Cooperative Purchase Program from Valley Ford Truck, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $86,547. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. This also was an item that was discussed in November at our Finance Committee meeting. It is on our replacement schedule. It's a 3411 is the number for the truck. It's a 2007 Ford F50 dump truck. The lift mechanism for it. The truck does need to be replaced. It's utilized as a plow truck in the winter for plowing dead ends and intersections. It does not carry salt per se very often, but has no salt equipment on the back in the way of a spreader. It's just a dump truck. During the summer, we use it for road excavations and hauling dirt and stone, topsoil and those kind of things. This also was available under Ohio Cooperative Purchase Program under contract RS 007536, and that was awarded to Valley Ford Truck of Cleveland also. This truck is going to cost, their quote, which I also attached, was $86,547. And I'm requesting council's authorization to purchase it through Valley Ford under the Cooperative Purchase Program.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? And if not, is there a motion to approve the purchase?
So moved, Mayor.
Okay, a motion by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Cooney. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, very good, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCorney. We have, has been before the city before. It is in furtherance of the implementation of the rebranding of the city, which began, the process which began in 2018 and more earnestly in 2019. This is the Priority One signage program, which is much the same as has been previously provided to council prior to this year. However, it is back slightly updated with respect to a couple of the sign placements, but otherwise substantially the same as most members of council have seen previously. This item was also distributed by Mrs. Thomas. I think the one significant change between this version of the Priority One sign program and the one that was before council previously is the movement of one monument sign to Fairmount Circle, basically on the side approaching John Carroll University. Otherwise, it is substantially similar to previous Priority One sign program proposals before the council. Any questions or discussion with request to a motion to authorize seeking bids for city signage, Mr. Rowe?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes.
Well, one, I fully support the project, so I just want to lay that out there now. But you did say there were some differences from the, I guess, the bid documents from before. I do not have bid documents in my packet, so I'm not able to see what the differences are. You mentioned movement of one monument sign to Fairmount Circle. Could you elaborate on the other differences?
Yes. Well, I think Kelly sent out that item separate from the rest of the packet. Should have been in everybody's email. But the movement was rather than building on and adding an additional monument sign, instead of a full monument sign at the south end of South Belvoir when you're coming up from Fairmount, that will instead be a secondary type sign, which would be the sign which is on the iron pole.
Okay.
Or aluminum pole, the metal pole, and with the aluminum sign hanging from it, which is still, very nice sign.
Yeah.
But because of the placement at John Carroll University in connection with that being a real gateway into that campus, the thought here was to move the monument sign, from South Belvoir, the southern end, to Fairmount Circle, and just swapping out the kind of sign. So we're not adding an additional monument sign. We are simply moving one of the monument signs there, and what would have been over there would have been a secondary sign. The north end of South Belvoir will still have a monument sign.
A monument sign. Okay. So
somebody coming in off of 271 driving to John Carroll University, they're going to see that monument sign when they turn onto Belvoir.
I guess for benefit of council, since it's not in our packet, I did dig through and I found the bid from 2019. It was from Archer Sign, and they bid this project at $99,593.83. And that included 3 primary gateway signs. So you're saying those 3 are still in?
Well, there are, I think at this time, only 2 primary gateway signs, because when we brought this to council last year, we had reduced it to 2 primary gateway signs as a cost-saving measure. So here it's still 2 primary gateway signs, but the only primary gateway signs would be at the north end of South Belvoir and then at Fairmount Circle. The rest are secondary gateways.
Okay, and then you had 8 back then in 2019, 8 secondary gateway signs. So you're saying that would be 9 now, since you went from 3 primary to 2?
I would have to. I'm basing it off of what we did last year, not what we did in 2019. So I think it might be
last year's.
A few more than that. Well,
I don't remember seeing that.
Well, last year we brought it before council, and we were unable to get a second to go at that time.
Okay. So you're saying there's more than 8?
You know what, let me bring that up.
Okay.
I had it up, and then my computer reset during the last committee meeting, so it closed it, so let me
So it says there's
locate it.
12 total signs right now.
That sounds right.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so then you had 2 pole-mounted gateway signs, 1 Stinson Park identification and 1 Stinson gateway.
Yeah, the pole.
So you're saying the quantities are the same?
Well, I think the pole-mounted signs, I think there's actually a few more, because,
Okay.
because I don't know why there would only have been 2 pole-mounted signs,
know why
but there
that
are
doesn't
more
make
than
sense.
2 around the city. Because you got a pole-mounted sign
There's
at,
Meadowbrook, there's Belmore.
Right, there are a bunch of
There's Warrensville Center.
Right,
by
Warrensville.
Whole Foods.
right, yes, there's one at Warrensville Center right by Whole Foods, there's one on Warrensville Center just past the BP, there's one on Cedar Road just as you pass the University Commons Plaza, there's one on South Taylor as you approach the Heinens. I mean, there's a lot more pole signs than just 2, so, you know, I don't know why we would have only been doing 2 in 2019, but it is more like, I don't know, 9 or 12, or 8, there are more.
Well, those aren't the expensive ones. That's the
They're not
primary and
nearly-
secondary.
yeah,
are the
those are
big
the
money
least
ones.
expensive of all the
Okay,
signs.
and then we had talked way back when about an electronic sign. Is that part of this packet?
No.
No? Okay, good.
No.
Okay.
In fact, the electronic signs that were designed previously, I think, ought to be updated and redesigned when we do address those. That'll be a different phase of the sign program.
Okay, thank you.
Very expensive, but
But
very impactful.
yes, and I think you know, I still stand by the idea that we ought to have one at Purvis and probably one at City Hall as we continue to explore, you know, alternatives for City Hall. Investing in that kind of signage at City Hall right now is probably not well taken.
Premature, once we have,
Okay.
what we know what the facility's gonna look like and all that, and where it could be placed.
Yeah,
Because
you
we're
know.
way ahead of that. We're
Right.
way, you know, cart before the horse.
I think when we get to the design phase of new municipal facilities, you know, part of that could also be what the sign will look like.
Sure.
And it may be completely different than what was previously conceived. And also, the previous message board on that sign, I think, was done in single color in part to comport with, which was at that time the prevailing view zoning-wise with regard to electronic signs in the city, and we've moved away from that. So, you know, a full-color electronic sign would just be better.
Okay. So I think this is enough information for me to make a judgment on seeking bids. So I would just request that we see the bid documents when we accept the bids. Just because the line item for the budget is substantially more than what we had previously budgeted in previous years. So I just want to verify that.
And with everything being as it is, you know, we'll see what comes back.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Sachs.
Thank you, Mayor Brennan. Some of the pictures that were in our packet show that the concrete base of some of those signs were broken. At what point do we, you know, what's the process to include that? You can have the sign and then there's broken concrete around it. I can't pull it up on my computer this second. Perhaps Washington off of Fairmount, could that be one of them?
Yeah, I mean, they're
The
cracked.
actual pictures.
There's a bunch cracked.
Yeah, I think when it comes to those bases, I mean, the foundations of those, we understand institutionally, are at least 3 feet deep. And, you know, the removal of the entire base together with the foundation would be a substantial undertaking. I think it would be less expensive simply to repair those bases. And I think that is the direction we would likely
Okay,
go.
so that's after this. I'm asking, like, what's the process? Is it simultaneous? Is it after? Kind of want to be, I'd like to see all of it done.
Well, yeah, I think it should all be done. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me
don't
to
know how
install
that
a beautiful
works.
new sign on top of a broken base. No, that should be taken care of, and
But that's a separate bid, that's a separate process.
I don't know if it needed to be.
I don't know.
out.
yeah.
Okay.
Just looks like repair work.
I don't know. I mean,
Is repair work, so we do that internally? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think we could, or we could handle it separately. I don't know that that's something we need to have Guide Studio and a sign fabricator work on. I mean, this is masonry work.
Okay, just putting it out there, not
Because it
to overlook
clearly
it.
states, like, I think location 7 was the one I just looked at.
There were a
They
couple.
call out that, you know, the base
Forgive
is
me, I can't
damaged
pull it up.
in their documents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We spoke about 2 years ago adding a pole sign on Green Road because that is a gateway. And there's nothing here, you know, you have Taylor Road, you have Fairmount by John Carroll, but there's nothing on Green, and that's a huge gateway for us.
A pole sign or a secondary gateway sign? Because I think a pole sign, there's currently a pole sign there, and I don't know.
Probably a secondary gate sign, actually.
Okay.
I mean,
That area
we
gets a lot of
always
gateways.
say we have, you know, our
Consider
gateways, and
difference.
that's a gateway, so. I mean, I would rather even have a gateway sign there and not have one on East Carroll. Like, I don't understand why there's one on East Carroll. To swap those, that seems to be more important on Green Road.
I think it may have been a question about whether there was adequate space to put on the sidewalk there. There's the gateway sign.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
it's squishy.
Right, so I think that's why there isn't a secondary gateway sign there, because I think it was determined that there wasn't room for it on Green Road. I mean, I'd love to have one there, but I don't know that we have room for it there. I think that was why I think that's why it's set forth like that. I think we went ahead and added one to East Carroll, simply because it's a more traffic street than it used to be. And you know, it makes, you know, it made sense to us administratively that we upgrade the signage on that street.
Okay, so then can we make sure there's a pole sign that replaces the one by Heinen's then? I think there's one right there. Because I don't see that here.
Let me, I need to.
Well, Heinen's is the location.
So.
Yeah, I don't see any. I only see it by Whole Foods, and I only see it by
Let me see.
Fairmont, by Taylor.
There's in
What's
the
this?
proposal, there's a pole-mounted secondary gateway on Green Road.
Is this Green Road? Sure.
Right.
Right.
A secondary one.
Green?
A
Pole-mounted
pole
secondary, right.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were
Yeah, well, then there is one. Yeah,
inquiring if there could be a
is.
gateway sign there?
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
There's this
you'd have to
secondary
like
gateway.
do a caddy corner somewhere. I don't think there's room.
Yeah, there is one in that area
There is.
for Beechwood.
I don't see a picture here. That's my, it's not on any of the pictures in 1 through 11, so that's why I was.
Well, I think what I would refer you to, let me find it here. All right, is on page 11 of 16 of the design intent attachment, on Green Road, you know, on Green Road, we do have it indicated that it would be a secondary gateway.
Okay, they just didn't snap a picture of it. the
Yeah,
current one then?
I don't think they included a picture because but it is,
Okay.
yeah.
It's listed
It's
among the
here,
locations.
Michelle.
Right there.
So there's really 13, there's not 12. That's the one that's missing then probably. Because there's.
It's page 95.
Today.
Excuse me, Mary, you're referring to page 95 in the packet? For the location of the sign on Green Road? Secondary mounted pole sign. The pole mounted secondary gateway.
Yeah, I'm looking now on page 2 of the sign audit. On the northern part of South Green Road, there is an A2 green circle indicating that this would be a secondary gateway sign. And where it says sign has been removed, I think it's referring to the fact that right now the sign is missing, probably due to construction. But the idea isn't that we don't build a sign or put a secondary gateway sign there. The idea is that we do.
Excuse me, Mayor, if you proceed towards the back of the presentation.
Which attachment are we looking at?
I'm looking at the job packet. It's the, our council packet on page 95.
Okay, I don't have that.
Okay.
I'm looking at.
There's a draft location plan. Phase 2, revision 4, there, it shows a pole-mounted secondary gateway sign on Green Road and a secondary gateway sign at East Carroll and at Cedar and Green Road.
I want to make sure we're
And this
looking at
would
the same thing,
be,
if you don't mind.
yeah, no problem. This is right.
Are you looking at this? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so this is like the one right here.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you got these two. Right.
It's just a little misleading because it doesn't have.
Right,
all of
correct.
them.
So she's, I believe Mrs. Weiss may be referring to that area,
Yes.
potentially.
Yes.
If there's, because it's a narrow tree lawn.
Well, yeah, but that is simply a pole-mounted sign.
Right, correct.
Right,
Yeah.
which basically, we're talking about a metal sign that can
Correct.
go either on an existing telephone pole, or you can plant a simple pole, like you might put a no parking sign on.
Right.
And then you attach that sign to that.
Yeah, so.
Because there isn't a lot of space.
Right, yeah, because the previous page has the description of the A4 pole-mounted gateway sign.
Mhm. Yes.
Right, and that's what I would agree probably would may be appropriate in that area because of the space.
Oh, okay.
Of the
Yes.
available space, yeah.
Yes. And to be clear, on the A4 pole-mounted sign, there's an exemplar pole there, but they're not making the pole. It's just on a pole to demonstrate what it would look like on a pole.
Right, okay.
Unlike, say, the A2 gateway, where they're going to actually make that pole.
Huh,
Gotcha.
okay.
The A4 signs simply go on whatever pole is available.
Uh-huh.
Usually a pole that's already there, or a basic pole that we just plant there, or install there, because it's the kind of pole that you might have one of our Tree City signs, or a no parking sign, or, no parking between the certain hours overnight and so on.
You don't want to buy a pole?
We can talk about it. All right.
Okay, Mayor, so I'll make a motion to authorize seeking bids for city signage.
Okay, very good. Motion to authorize seeking bids for city signage by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay.
Mrs. Sachs, you take it.
All right, we'll take it with Mrs. Sachs. Second by Mrs. Sachs. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blankenship?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next is item L, motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing legal proceedings, personnel, real estate matters. Administration does not have anything this evening to seek executive session on, so we are not seeking for a motion on that. So we will now turn to item 9, reports and communications from the directors of the various departments, and we will start with finance. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just like to give everybody an update on Rita income tax collections. We did receive our distribution in June, which represents collections through the end of May. This year we've collected $6,349,297 from Rita in the period from January to June. Last year we collected over that same time period $5,489,958. So that difference is $859,339, which is about a 15.7% increase. I think if you remember the last meeting, that increase was about 20%. The difference between this year and last, but the June collection this year was a little less than the June collection from last year. Still a good sign though, 15+% over last year. We are in finance finishing up with the audit work to issue the financial statements to the state by the end of June. That should be done within the next 2 weeks. Then the field work will be completed in July, where the auditors come back and do some more testing after the financials are done. So I'm anticipating probably an August post-audit conference set up to get the results of that. Have not received any indication that there's any issue of any concern, so that's a good sign, but I'll keep everybody posted as we move along through that. And just was completing the closing of the May reports, so I'll have those reports done prior to Monday's finance meeting. So I should have those closed tomorrow, the revenue and expense statement of cash and the investment reports, and I will get those emailed out to everybody the next day or two. And that's all I have right now, Mayor. Thank
Okay,
you.
very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Seeing none, Director of Law, Mr. Cicero, do you have a report?
No report, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cicero. Public Safety, Police, report?
No report, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. No report. He's excused from tonight's meeting, and there's no report. Service, Mr. Picorni.
I would just like to make council aware that we have started sewer cleaning and catch basin cleaning around the city. So catch basin cleaning is a 3-year do the whole city projects. This year, the third of the city that we're doing is Warrensville Center to South Green Road from Cedar to Fairmont. So that section will receive catch basin cleaning. Sewer cleaning is a 4-year program to get around the entire city. The section we're doing this year is from Warrensville Center to South Belvoir Boulevard from Cedar to Fairmont. So a smaller swath, but still north-south. End of the month, we'll start working on our tree contract, and then you'll start hearing about trees again for several months as we start looking at what needs to be pruned and removed under one contract and what needs to be planted under another.
Okay.
That's my report.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Okay, very good. Thank you. Housing and Community Development, Mr. Engelbrecht.
Good evening. Some statistics from the last 2 weeks within the department. We've done 40 point of sale inspections, 39 rental inspections, 62 lawns, and there are several cases which will be filed with the court, and that's thanks to our prosecutor and his assistance with the updating of our complaint form. Juneteenth's coming up. The group that's come together for Juneteenth has put in a lot of work, and the event should be great. There's over 30 vendors, along with the folks who will be part of the event, including Nova's Performing Arts Center and Forecast and so on and so forth. Some of the vendors include the Board of Elections, University Hospitals, who will be doing health screenings for free. The Board of Elections will be registering people to vote. Black Lives Matter will be there. Cleveland Water Department will be there. It should be a good event for everybody, and it'll be Father's Day too. So, you know, dads who usually are by the grill can come out and actually, you know, have a nice time. Other than that, I have nothing else to report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Any questions for Mr. Engelbrecht? There are a couple here. We'll start with Ms. Blankfeld.
Where are we on the receivership piece?
We're meeting with some different developers who might be able to take the entire list that the city has.
Versus just those
versus
three
just
properties.
the few that make the most financial sense. But those meetings are continuing.
Okay. I don't want that to disappear. That's an important one.
Right,
I know
right.
you're on it. I just wanted an update. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Sachs?
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask about the receivership, but the second thing was, the Juneteenth celebration is, what, 8 hours? Okay.
Well, 7, 1:30 to 8:30.
Is there a time, like a listing of, because just so many amazing productions and things, it would be helpful because, I don't know, about sticking around for that long.
Yes,
Yeah.
speaking of which, Mike Cook, we're working on that together.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes. There is one item, I believe, which is firmly in place on the schedule as far as when it actually will be, and everything else is still kind of being massaged into place. But that will all be forthcoming, and then, in advance of the 19th, folks will, if there's particular things they want to make sure they see, they'll be able to refer to the schedule and make sure that they avail themselves time-wise to see what they want to see.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Anything else for Mr. Engelbrecht? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. City Engineer, Mr. Chuney.
Thank you, Mayor. Just some construction jobs to report on. The Cedar Road sewer repair job is completed, and we'll be getting the invoice for that pretty soon. The Cedar Road resurfacing job run by ODOT is ahead of schedule. They switched traffic a week early. They're on, our half of the section between Miramar and Green, and they should be completing that in the next 2 weeks. Right after the 4th of July, they'll switch to the west side of town from Taylor. They started laying pipe yesterday. I don't think they did much today in the rain, but they are putting in the new water main now. Lastly, there's 2 more. The gas line project, Ashurst, Meadowbrook area, from Fairmont to Meadowbrook, that has started this week. They'll be replacing, I don't remember how many feet, but there's a lot of gas line that they're replacing there and services. So it's going to be all summer with that project. So lastly, we had a pre-construction meeting with the street stripers this morning. They are going to start next week with the long lines, they call it, and then they come back and do the crosswalks and the words on pavement and things like that. The stripers work from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. They're gone by 6 a.m. in the morning, and then they start again. They will be working Sunday through Wednesday night. If they get a rain out day, they'll work Thursday night. They don't want to be out there on Friday or Saturday nights. So basically their schedules are Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. And they work 4 10s, or whatever that is. So.
Okay.
And
Efficient.
that's all I have.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chuney. Any questions for Mr. Chuney? Okay. All right, very good. Thanks. Communications and civic engagement, Mr. Cook.
No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook. Economic development, okay, no report. Thank you, Mrs. Strucker. We now turn to the reports of standing committees and taking of action thereon. Building and housing, Mrs. Blankfeld.
As previously stated, our committee will meet again on before the next council meeting on June 21st. Probably 5:30, possibly 6, but Mrs. Thomas will have the agenda and the date on the website.
Okay, very good. Has there been any action on the engineering fees ordinance?
That is still under consideration with our law department, but yeah, that will be part of our discussion.
Do you mean the professional bidding ordinance?
Yes.
That's going to be in the finance meeting on June
No,
13th.
I'm talking about the ordinance from last March with regard to codifying that engineering fees would be passed on in development situations, so that we don't have to put them back into
Correct.
development reports.
Yeah, that is still with Mr. McConville.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, community outreach. Mr. King is not here. Does anybody from that committee have a report? Seeing none. Economic development, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor, we will have a meeting soon. I just yesterday sent Kelly some dates to send a poll out, so keep an eye out for that email. It should be coming shortly, but there will be a meeting in the next few weeks to formalize the subcommittee to the Economic Development Committee for the new zoning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rock. Finance, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There will be a meeting June 13th.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs.
What?
Weiss.
13th, Monday.
All right. Do you know what time?
I believe it's at 6.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Cooney.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooney. Safety, Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to passing the Peddlers Ordinance, which was passed this evening on emergency, we had a discussion regarding an amendment which we intend to make to the ordinances related to gun crimes. This would allow or require, any individual who is convicted of a misdemeanor gun-related crime to have the firearm used as an instrumentality of that crime forfeited by the municipal court. We have a meeting on Monday with Judge Keller to discuss our intent, and barring any major objections, we will have this on the agenda at our next regular meeting on emergency for the whole council to consider. Finally, we have established the Criminal Ordinance Review Subcommittee and appointed to that committee Mr. Cicero, our prosecutor, Chief Rogers, our police chief, myself, and University Heights' own Terry Gilbert, who has half a century of experience in the law and is the author of A Lawyer's 50-Year Struggle for Rights in a World of Wrongs. He is a fantastic attorney, both in the civil rights and criminal senses. He's practiced at all levels of law, and I'm really excited to work with him on revamping this. So that will be my summer school project with you, Mr. Cicero, is to revamp our ordinances and have those ready to present, hopefully, in the first or second meeting of the year. No further report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. Service and Utilities, Mrs. Sachs.
Thank you, Mayor Brennan. The next Service and Utilities Committee meeting is being finalized sometime in June. I'm just waiting to receive the doodle poll results from key individuals invited. The agenda will be updated to include a list of questions that I'm actually going to hand out here. You can just pass these around. In this public meeting to obtain responses to emails and questions that I sent Mayor Brennan and Mr. Picorni that have either been ignored or partially answered. And the purpose of these questions are just to obtain information necessary to make informed decisions about the cost impact of rubbish collection if transitioned to the curb. So I look forward to obtaining responses from these questions from the administration at the next Service and Utilities Committee meeting. It's not just for me, it's for all council, where our discussions can be made publicly and in good faith for the purpose of doing the will of University Heights residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've spoke with Mr. Picorni about these questions, and it is our position that we're waiting until we get the survey results on the solid waste survey with respect to these items. I mean, we don't even know what the survey results are yet, and this has become a distraction with respect to these types of questions when we have these other processes going on, at least 2 surveys it seems, and results that we ought to look at, and then what we do from there.
So 2 things. Number 1, I would have appreciated the courtesy of a response, even if that was it. And the second thing is, at least you know what to be prepared for, at least some of the questions regarding the actual cost of transitioning to the curbside, if that becomes something we do. Mm-hmm. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're not in a position to answer those questions at this time.
Well, thank you for the courtesy tonight.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, there'll be a doodle poll sent out tomorrow for a joint facilities and infrastructure meeting the last week of June.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss.
And just as a side note, the finance meeting starts at 7.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, reports of special committees and the taking of action thereon. Seeing none, unfinished and miscellaneous business. Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Sacks?
Aye.
Mrs. Blanco?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Remember that the next city council meeting is on Tuesday evening, June 21st.
I got set up for board of zoning. Here. Yeah, board of zoning, 8 a.m.
That's a good thought. Remind us. Yeah, send me an email, perfect. You know what, and if you would copy Mr. Cicero on. Perfect, no, good thinking. Chris? Always good thinking, thank you. You've yet to show me otherwise.
I'll read them out. Okay? For some reason, it's over there.